Let's speak to independent retail analyst now, Chris Gilmour. Chris, your take on this list gazetted by the Minister and his department today.
Good evening, Francis. Yes, look, I suppose it's no surprise that we've got this. And I can kind of see a bit of logic behind this in the sense that I suppose they're looking at the whole supply chain. So in other words, if manufacturers are only allowed to work at 30% capacity, then I guess that you should be only looking at round about 30% of their final output to be allowed to be sold at a retail level. But having said that, when you start trying to micromanage in whatever enterprise you are, you're going to come unstuck. How on earth do you police this? You mentioned at the start talking about the fashion police. Well, it's going to be incredibly difficult to actually regulate all of this. My view is very simple. You either open up a store to sell everything within the store, or you don't open it at all. When you get down to this kind of nitpicking sort of level, it does become kind of bizarre. And I can understand why former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel talked about. He wasn't talking about this specifically, but he was talking about some of the legislation that's come out of this thing as being not rational. And it would be nice to get a bit of an explanation as to what this is about. As I say, I think I can see some degree of rationality in terms of if you look at the whole supply chain. But to be honest, I think it probably merits a bit more opening up than we've currently got.
Yeah. Trevor Manuel actually quoted as saying some of this is irrational as well. It begs the question, why is it more dangerous to buy a T-shirt than a long sleeve shirt if this is about health? But having said that, the minister seemingly was being responsive. Retail bodies are saying that they needed more clarity because they wanted to be on the right side of the law. So they asked for a list instead of just winter clothing. Could we see it like that he was trying to be responsive and at least helping people by giving lots and lots of clarity?
Well, that's fine and that's good. But I think what would probably be better would be a higher degree of self-regulation so that, for example, there would be a limit on the number of people allowed in a store. They could buy whatever they liked, but you wouldn't be allowed to have that many people in the store at any one point in time. And then you would have to adopt a kind of system whereby you weren't allowed to loiter. Now, that's very difficult. You see, with food, it's very simple and straightforward. You pretty much know what you want. Whereas with clothing, you like to look at it and feel it and touch it and do this type of thing. So it's more difficult to prevent the kind of loitering that traditionally goes with buying clothing. But having said that, there are ways and means of doing it. And I think, rather than legislating this, I think it would have been perhaps better to have engaged the industry, the retail industry, more and said, now listen, guys, what we're trying to do is to preserve this very functional social distancing within the stores and to make sure that we don't end up getting the so-called second wave. The other thing we have to bear in mind, Francis, is that consumer spending in aggregate constitutes about 58% of South Africa's GDP. It's a huge, huge element. And so we're currently only scratching the surface. And while I can understand that these consumer bodies are very grateful, it's very small.
Mm. I'm glad you picked up on that because we're waiting in just a few days' time. We'll get some retail data. I presume for April, it's going to be absolutely dismal. And like you say, this is a very, very crucial sector for the economy, Chris.
No, you're absolutely. The April figures are going to be utterly horrendous, as they are all around the world. South Africa is not unique in this regard. But as I say, I think we really need to attack this one a bit more vigorously now, with the knowledge that consumer spending is such a vital part of the economy. And I think perhaps once we get to level 3, it'll be a bit easier, a bit looser, a bit more straightforward. But that's why I say the looser it becomes, then the science starts kicking in. And what I mean by that is that the looser it becomes, the greater the danger of reinfection. And that is why I think rather than concentrating on what you can buy and sell, or what you can sell in the store, should I say, rather go for a more innovative way of making sure that people stay as far apart as possible within the confines of the store, make sure that there aren't crowds, make sure there's not a lot of loitering. I think the regulations would be far better employed in that regard than getting into the kind of minutiae of what can and what can't be sold.
And so many jobs are affected by these decisions as well. Another one that's come in for criticism is the minister saying that e-commerce cannot be fully open. That may be unfair to some of the physical retailers who can't sell all their stock. Does that argument hold any water for you?
None at all. Look, what I think COVID-19 has done, it has acted as a catalyst to get many things going that otherwise would have taken a much, much longer time. And what I'm including in that working from home, for example, the emergence of the things like Zoom, this type of thing. E-commerce is a vital part and a growing part of industry all around the world. In South Africa, it's still tiny. I mean, maybe it's 2% of total retail sales, but it could be an awful lot larger. And again, given what I was saying a few moments ago about being innovative and being inventive and reducing the risk of infection, I think it makes an awful lot more sense to promote and encourage much more in the way of e-commerce if one is really being serious about trying to preserve the health of the country.
All right, thank you very much. Chris Gilmour, retail analyst, calling for looser regulation or retail basically to be open in terms of the items that can be sold. Looking back on that list gazetted today.